Prespawn bass fishing is one of the best times of the year to go fishing, but it can be extremely frustrating when you're seeing everybody around you catch these monster bass and you're catching nothing. My name is Wes Littlefield with YourBassGuy.com, and I've got 3 tips that are going to help you catch more bass during Prespawn. Let's get started. Tip number 1 is knowing when Prespawn actually takes place. A lot of people think that, it's early spring, and that's not true. It's actually more of late winter, and even on into winter a little bit. Bass begin to stage up and move a little bit more shallow as those water temperatures just even increase 1 or 2 degrees. They feel that change. They notice that the days are getting longer, and they begin to move into their pre-spawn areas. So knowing when that is for your region is huge. Now, generally speaking, for way southern states, especially like Florida and Texas and maybe southern parts of California and stuff, this can happen as early as January, mid-late January. These fish are in pre-spawn mode. While as you move farther north, like you've got Oklahoma, which is where I'm from, Arkansas, Tennessee, those mid states like that, they're going to be more like February and into March. And then of course, as you just keep moving farther north and north, the Dakotas on up, it'll be March, April. And then typically those most northern states are going to be, March, April, May, maybe, but that's kind of a little bit late. There's no like, this day is when Prespawn begins. It's just kind of a timing with the fact of weather patterns and the time of day. So even though the days might get longer and it triggers them into it, if you've got a bunch of cold fronts coming through, it might delay it a little bit. So I can't give you specific dates on when it happens, but knowing and understanding a general idea of when it happens so you can begin to look in the right areas, that gives you an advantage over a lot of anglers. So we know generally when to go pre-spawn bass fishing, but now we need to know where to go. Where the heck do these bass spend their time during pre-spawn? And the simple answer is everywhere. It's kind of frustrating because they can be spread out at this time, meaning that, they might be, not the bass themselves are spread out, they're usually congregated, but they could be spread out at different locations. So you'll fish one body of water and they could all be still deep. And then the next day they could be moving up into the shallows. So you've really got to figure that out. So the best places to begin are often those transition areas. So what I mean by transition area is where it goes from deep to shallow. That's where bass are most likely going to spend most of their time. If it's been colder lately, they're going to be a little bit more in the deeper water. If it's been on a warming trend lately, they're going to be moving more up into the shallows. So you've kind of got to find that transition area and then determine from there where you think they are. But transition areas are key this time of year. Now, within these transition areas, finding isolated cover or isolated structure, that will help drastically increase your odds. Fish are tend to gonna be hanging on like standing timber or even, along the bottom rock piles, whatever. They're gonna be congregated around this structure. And so that's why it's best to really find the structure, and then more than likely you're gonna find the fish around that. And it's gonna vary depending on the day, whether they wanna be around rock piles or they wanna be along the cliff edge or they wanna be in the brush piles or just on standing timber. You've kind of got to play around with that, but finding that isolated structure will drastically help you catch more fish during pre-spawn. So the last thing we're going to talk about pre-spawn bass fishing, and that's lure selection. One reason why I like pre-spawn is because it doesn't matter so much. And let me clarify, the bass are kind of hungry, and by kind of hungry, they're really hungry, and they know that, hey, I'm about to spend a long period of time during the spawn not eating, so they're going to be feeding up. So that's why, part of the reason why they're at their biggest is because they're just gorging themselves. The second reason that they're biggest is the females are going to be having eggs inside them, so they're going to be producing eggs, which needs more energy, so that means they're going to eat more, and it kind of goes hand in hand. So the females are going to be big, they're going to be feeding, and you can just throw whatever lure you want at them, essentially. Now, I've got 6 lures that I tend to prefer, and most anglers would agree that these 6 lures are really where to begin with, I guess you could say. You know, it's not like this is the only 6 lures you can use during pre-spawn, because like I said, they're going to be eating and they're going to be chasing. But the first one is a spinnerbait. The reason I love a spinnerbait in general is because, number one, it's really not difficult to fish. You can fish it many different water levels, depths in the water, if you want to say that, different colors. You can change the blades up. You can put soft plastic trailers on it, or you can fish it without the trailers. There's a lot you can do with a spinnerbait just to change it up a little bit and keep those fish biting. And during the pre-spawn, and it's critically important, is it's a moving bait, so you're going to be able to fish a lot of water, and you're going to be able to just keep moving, you know, if you're not getting a bite, and locate the fish much faster than you would with just like dragging a soft plastic, or even, you know, slowly swimming a soft plastic or like a wacky worm. The second one that I'm going to talk about is one of my other all-time favorites, and that's a crankbait, specifically flat-sided crankbait. I want something that has a little less wobble. I want it to be a little tighter, and I like flat-sided and lipless crankbaits because they sink, and so you don't have to fish them as fast this time of year. And that's critical because the water is still cold, the fish are still moving somewhat slow, and you want it to look natural, so you don't want to be burning it. And that's where a lipless crankbait comes in, because you can still get it down deep, but you don't got to be burning it. So a lipless crankbait, typically the color selection on that is like fire craw or a crawfish color. Any of those red and orangish colors, they're just dynamite this time of year. The next lure is a suspending jerkbait. Now this is more for when fish are a little bit deeper, and you're going to locate a school of fish, cast it out there, and just twitch it through them and try to initiate a bite. I personally love a jerkbait, period, just because it's kind of like a crankbait. You can cover quite a bit of water, not as much obviously as a crankbait or a spinnerbait, so you still, you know, once you've found the fish, this is something more to go to keep trying to trigger and switch it up a little bit. Another skirted lure that's one of my favorites is the chatterbait or the bladed jig, and this one is a lot like a spinnerbait. You know, you can fish it in different depths, different speeds. That also changes, you know, the sound of the clattering, the chatter of the bait, and it's just deadly effective during the pre-spawn. So grab a chatterbait, throw it on there, you know, fish it slow to start off with, especially in the morning, and as the sun comes up and the water heats up a little bit, you can speed up your retrieve. Once again, I'm gonna stick with red colors, but sometimes if you get like an early spring rain, you can, you know, the water muddy up a little bit and you can go with those brighter colors, or go opposite and go darker colors. But you're gonna have to play around with what colors the fish are liking for that day. But a chatterbait is one of the best pre-spawn lures. Sticking with other skirted lures, and that is the good old trusty jig. That jig just works any time of year, so always have one tied on. That's my recommendation. Once again, you can fish it any various ways. You know, if you want to swim it through the water column for suspended fish, you can do that. If they're down closer to the bottom, you can drag it along the bottom. You can flip it up into cover, underneath docks, whatever. Wherever the fish are at, you can fish a jig, and that's why it's one of the best, if not the best, bass lures ever. Now the last one is kind of similar to a jig in a way, especially if you pin it, and that is a Texas rig. Now, a lot of guys aren't thinking Texas rig this time of year, and personally, I stinking love a Texas rig. I catch so many fish with it because it's really versatile. You know, if you want to pin it and fish it like a jig, you can flip it up into cover, really thick cover, and you don't have to worry about getting snagged so much. And if you need to fish it out in the open and, you know, not let it hit the bottom, throw on a lighter weight and fish it a little bit faster, throw different soft plastics on there, different colors. It's just very versatile. And this time of year, everything else is failing on you, try a Texas rig because they work. I don't know what else to say. They just work. Now that you know these few tips about pre-spawn bass fishing, you're better set to go catch the biggest bass of your life during the pre-spawn. Now, if you want to learn how to fish the flat-sided crankbait, which is like I said, one of my favorites. There's a video down below me you can check out that shows you how to tie it on, how to fish it, and I pretty much guarantee you that you're gonna catch more bass fishing a flat-sided crankbait this time of year, especially if you can watch this next video. Thank you guys for watching, and I want you to always remember that education is important, but fishing is essential.